Amanda Owen, the beloved Yorkshire Shepherdess, has finally opened up about life after her divorce from her ex-husband, revealing the harsh reality of their relationship. Known for her strong, independent spirit, Amanda's candid account pulls back the curtain on the struggles of living with her ex-husband after their split. Let's take a closer look at the truth Amanda Owen has shared and how it's reshaping the way we see her life after the divorce. In the early days of marriage, Amanda and her ex-husband's relationship started like any other, full of hope, excitement, and dreams of a future together. When they first met, everything seemed perfect. They shared common values, a similar sense of humor, and an undeniable chemistry that made them feel like they were meant to be. For a while, it felt like they could conquer the world together, like nothing could stand in their way. They were a power couple, or so it seemed. Their early days were filled with adventures, shared goals, and a mutual understanding that they were building something strong. Amanda, always the optimistic one, would often talk about how they were a team, how they complemented each other. Their lives seemed full of potential, and they both believed that their connection was unbreakable. The idea of building a family together and creating a life that would make them proud was always part of the dream. But of course, nothing is ever as perfect as it seems from the outside. Like many relationships, theirs had its flaws, but at the time, neither of them saw them as insurmountable. There were moments of doubt, small arguments, and differences that didn't seem like a big deal at the time. They were just growing pains, or so they thought. Their friends and family watched as the couple seemed to live an ideal life, sharing their milestones, raising their children, and accomplishing their goals. For all outward appearances, Amanda and her ex-husband Clive were the couple everyone envied. However, as time passed, small cracks began to form. The connection that once felt unbreakable started to fray, but no one noticed, not even them at first. For Amanda, there were moments when she began to feel uneasy. It wasn't anything she could point to directly, but something was changing in their relationship. Clive, once so caring and attentive, started to withdraw emotionally. There were moments of silence that seemed to stretch on for far too long. There were times when Amanda would reach out for support, but it wasn't there in the way it once was. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but she knew something was off. Despite these subtle signs, Amanda was determined to make things work. She was invested in the relationship, and she wanted the life they had built together to continue thriving. She didn't want to give up. She kept convincing herself that everything would return to the way it used to be, that things would get better. They had been through tough times before, and they had always come out stronger. But deep down, Amanda knew that there were issues they couldn't ignore forever. What had started as a fairy tale had slowly turned into a reality where it was becoming harder to feel happy and fulfilled. And while Amanda loved her family and had great hopes for their future, the sense that something was missing began to eat away at her. Still, it wasn't enough to make her consider giving up, at least not yet. It was clear that Amanda was in the early stages of a journey that would test her in ways she never expected. There was so much she didn't know, so much she would later realize, and so much she would be forced to confront. As time passed, the cracks that had formed in Amanda and Clive's marriage began to widen. What had once been small, almost imperceptible issues started to grow into more noticeable problems. Amanda, ever the optimist, initially tried to downplay them, believing that it was just a phase. After all, no marriage was perfect, and they had both been through challenges before. But this time, it felt different. Something was off. The first signs of strain were subtle, small disagreements over everyday things. At first, they chalked it up to the stress of raising a family and managing busy careers. Life was demanding, and both of them were constantly on the go. Amanda thought that the fatigue from work, kids, and trying to juggle everything might be taking its toll. It wasn't uncommon for couples to experience tension during stressful periods, and she believed that things would settle down once the dust cleared. But as time went on, the issues didn't go away. They became more frequent and harder to ignore. The once harmonious atmosphere in their home started to feel charged with tension. There were more quiet moments when Amanda would try to talk to Clive, but the conversation would fizzle out or be met with distant responses. She noticed how he seemed to withdraw emotionally, no longer as present as he once was. And it wasn't just the silence. It was the lack of affection, the absence of the simple gestures that had once kept their bond strong. Amanda tried to be patient. She was used to being the strong one, the one who could weather the storm. She told herself that things would get better, that their relationship could withstand the challenges they were facing. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was wrong. One of the hardest things for Amanda was the way Clive's demeanor had changed. He had always been someone she could rely on, someone who was there for her when she needed support. But now, he seemed to be constantly preoccupied, more distant than ever. He was no longer the man who had once made her feel secure and loved. Amanda would lie awake at night wondering what had happened to the connection they once shared. During this time, Amanda kept a lot of her frustrations to herself. She didn't want to seem like she was complaining, and she certainly didn't want to air their dirty laundry in public. For the sake of their children and their family, she continued to put on a brave face. She hid her disappointment and confusion, hoping that things would improve. She knew that many couples went through rough patches, and perhaps this was just one of those times when they would have to work harder to get back on track. However, it wasn't long before Amanda realized that this wasn't just a temporary issue. It wasn't something that could be fixed with a few heart-to-heart conversations or a weekend getaway. The distance between her and Clive seemed to grow with each passing day. It wasn't just the emotional distance, it was the physical distance as well. They stopped spending as much time together, and when they did, it often felt awkward and forced. The easy camaraderie they once had seemed like a distant memory. Amanda found herself in a difficult position. She couldn't ignore the growing divide between them, but she didn't want to face the reality of it. The idea of their marriage falling apart was too overwhelming to consider. So instead, she buried her feelings, focusing on the day-to-day tasks of raising their children and maintaining the public image of a happy family. She continued to smile for the cameras, continuing to present a united front to the world, even though inside, she felt like she was slowly crumbling. When things fell apart, it was one of those moments when you know something irreversible has happened. The tension between Amanda and Clive had been building for quite some time, and while both had tried to push through it, there was no denying it any longer. The relationship was no longer sustainable. For Amanda, the realization came like a punch to the gut, a sudden moment of clarity that she couldn't ignore. It wasn't a specific incident or argument that marked the turning point. Rather, it was the accumulation of so many small moments, the gradual erosion of trust and connection. They had grown apart in ways that were impossible to fix, and neither of them seemed willing or able to put in the effort to rebuild what had once been a strong foundation. The love that had held them together in the beginning felt like a distant memory, now replaced by resentment and exhaustion. Amanda tried to pinpoint when things had started to go wrong. Was it when Clive stopped showing interest in her day-to-day life, or when they stopped sharing the little moments of joy that once brought them closer together? She couldn't say for sure, but somewhere along the way, they had lost their way. The couple that had once been inseparable was now like strangers living under the same roof. For Amanda, the hardest part wasn't the fighting or the silent treatments, it was the emotional disconnection. She felt like she was living with someone who no longer saw her, who no longer cared about her needs or desires. They had become two people simply coexisting, going through the motions without any real connection or intimacy. The love they had once shared had turned into something cold and distant, something neither of them seemed capable of reviving. At this point, Amanda knew she couldn't keep pretending. The weight of the situation was taking a toll on her emotionally and mentally. She had tried everything she could to fix things, but nothing worked. It felt like they were stuck in an endless loop of frustration with no way out. One evening, after another long day of silence and missed opportunities for connection, Amanda sat in their living room staring out the window and realized something: she couldn't keep living this way. She deserved more than this. She deserved to be with someone who made her feel loved, supported, and seen, not someone who had checked out emotionally and was merely going through the motions. The decision wasn't easy, but it was becoming clearer by the day. Amanda knew that if she stayed in this relationship any longer, it would only hurt her more. She was already emotionally drained, and the toll it was taking on her mental health was becoming undeniable. She had tried to be the strong one, to carry the weight of the relationship and keep it together, but now she understood that strength didn't mean staying in a situation that was toxic for both of them. It was in that moment that Amanda made the decision. She had to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. The marriage was over. They couldn't fix what had been broken. The love they once shared had faded, and the respect and understanding that had held them together were no longer there. It was time to let go. Clive was shocked, and understandably, there was a lot of anger and sadness from both sides. The conversation was filled with emotions and regret. Amanda had never wanted their marriage to end like this. She had dreamed of growing old with him, of building a life together, but life had other plans. Now all she could do was face the reality of what had been. Life after the divorce. When Amanda and Clive Owen's marriage ended, many assumed that would be the end of their shared life on the farm. After all, 22 years of marriage had come to a close, and with it, the idea that they would continue to work side by side at Raven's Seat, their beloved Yorkshire farm, seemed impossible. But despite their separation, Amanda and Clive remained deeply connected to the land, their children, and the daily life they had built together. And so, surprisingly, they continued working side by side. Their decision to keep farming together after the divorce wasn't an easy one, but it was one they both knew had to be made for the sake of their family. The emotional complexities of living together and sharing a business, even after the marriage was over, were immense. But they put their personal differences aside for the greater good. While the emotional separation between the two of them was clear to those who followed their story, the logistical side of life at Raven's Seat remained largely unchanged. They continued to work together on the farm, side by side, tending to the animals, managing the land, and making sure that everything continued to run smoothly for their 9 children. The connection to their land and to each other was far stronger than their past relationship struggles. For Amanda, the decision to stay on the farm and continue working with Clive was about more than just keeping things stable for the children. It was about a sense of duty to the land they had worked so hard to cultivate, a shared history that couldn't be easily erased by a divorce. Their new dynamic was far from traditional, and it was something both of them had to navigate carefully. There were moments of tension, of course, as they tried to balance their personal lives with their professional responsibilities. But there was also a new kind of respect between them, built on mutual understanding and the shared love they still had for their children and the farm. Amanda and Clive began to develop a routine that suited their new working relationship. They no longer shared a bed, but they continued to share a vision for Raven's Seat and their future there. The farm was not just a livelihood, it was a legacy, something they both felt deeply connected to. And despite everything that had happened, that connection was too strong to sever completely. While this arrangement may have seemed strange or even uncomfortable to outsiders, for Amanda and Clive, it was simply a new reality they had to adjust to. They were no longer married, but they were still partners in a much deeper sense. They were co-workers, co-parents, and co-caretakers of the land. And that bond, while different from the one they had once shared, was still undeniably strong. Despite the adjustments, their shared commitment to the farm became the bedrock of their new working relationship. But there was a bigger project on the horizon that would bring them even closer together, the restoration of a nearby stone barn, Andy John's, which had long been a part of the farm's history. This monumental task would require all of their energy, focus, and collaboration, and it would test their ability to work as a team in new ways. As the new project unfolded, both Amanda and Clive began to see how this new chapter of their lives was offering them an unexpected opportunity to reconnect, not just as ex-spouses, but as business partners with a shared vision for their future. Despite the personal and emotional challenges they had faced, their shared love for their children and the land they had built together meant that their journey wasn't over. Amanda finally spills the truth. When they decided to keep working together on the farm after their divorce, many thought it was a decision born from practicality. They had 9 children, a farm to run, and a legacy they weren't willing to let go of. But as the docu-series began filming, it quickly became clear that the reality of their arrangement was far more complicated than it seemed. The tension between them, which had once been private, was now becoming public. Living and working side by side with Clive after everything they'd been through was proving to be more difficult than she had anticipated. The docu-series, which was meant to showcase their post-divorce lives, revealed something Amanda had been forced to hide for the sake of the farm and their children, the emotional strain of having to work so closely with someone she had once loved, but now struggled to even be around. It was the last drop, and Amanda Owen finally spills the truth about living with her ex-husband after divorce, and it's not good. "I was forced to hide this. Everyone assumed it was going to be fine, that we just carry on as usual. But it hasn't been easy. It's hard, really hard, to work alongside Clive after everything that's happened." Despite agreeing to work together for the sake of the farm and their children, the reality of it was far from simple. The emotional baggage of their marriage, the years of living in each other's shadows, and the personal pain from the divorce still lingered. Amanda wasn't naive. She knew it wasn't going to be easy. But what she hadn't prepared for was how much those old feelings, the hurt, the frustration, and the unresolved issues, would resurface when they were working side by side on the farm every single day. Filming the docu-series only intensified the pressure. With the cameras capturing their every move, Amanda found herself in a position where she couldn't fully express how difficult it was to be around Clive, to work with him as if nothing had changed. The farm, which had once been a shared dream, was now a constant reminder of everything that had gone wrong. The docu-series was supposed to be a fresh start, a way to show the world how they were co-parenting and continuing to farm together. Instead, it only amplified the struggle Amanda had been facing in silence for so long. The difficulty Amanda faced wasn't just about dealing with Clive professionally. It was about trying to navigate a personal history that wasn't so easily erased. The farm was supposed to be a place of healing, a place where they could still function as a family even after their marriage fell apart. But it often felt like Amanda was walking on eggshells, trying to balance the tension between them while still maintaining the farm's demanding routine. At times, the cameras caught glimpses of their uncomfortable interactions, but Amanda tried to put on a brave face, always focusing on the bigger picture, her children, the farm, and the legacy. She was determined not to let their personal struggles interfere with their responsibilities, but it wasn't always easy to hide how much it hurt to be working alongside someone who had once been her closest partner. What happens next? Living and working alongside Clive was never going to be easy for Amanda, but as the months wore on, she realized just how difficult it was to maintain the delicate balance between professionalism and personal emotions. With their children relying on them and the demands of the farm never ceasing, Amanda found herself in a constant state of internal conflict. She couldn't afford to let the strain of their working relationship affect the children or the farm, but it was becoming harder and harder to keep up the facade. As time passed, Amanda began to notice the toll it was taking on her. The tension that lingered between her and Clive wasn't just an inconvenience, it was wearing her down mentally and emotionally. For Amanda, the farm had always been a place of refuge, a place where she could pour her energy into something tangible. The truth had been revealed, but the impact of it wasn't something Amanda had anticipated. Her world, which had seemed to be slowly stitching itself back together after the divorce, was now unraveling in ways she hadn't expected. The secrets she had kept hidden were now out in the open, but the path forward was no longer clear. Once the layers of the marriage were peeled back, the revelation that Amanda had been hiding so long was like a firestorm. It wasn't just the emotional toll that had broken her, but the realization that she had lived in a constant state of denial, both to protect her family and to protect herself. Clive, the person she had once trusted most, was now someone she had to navigate with newfound caution. For Amanda, the fallout came in several forms. On the one hand, there was the immediate reaction from those close to her. There was sympathy, of course, but also judgment. People had opinions about her decision to keep certain aspects of her marriage hidden. Some felt that she should have been more open, that by keeping her struggles a secret, she had allowed things to escalate to an uncontrollable point. Others rallied around her, recognizing that it wasn't easy to admit fault or weakness, especially when it came to something as personal as a marriage. But it wasn't just the people around her who were affected, it was also the children. Amanda had always prioritized their well-being, and she knew that the truth of what had happened between her and Clive would ultimately impact them. She had been careful to shield them from the harsh realities of their divorce, but now there were more conversations to be had, more questions to answer. And while Amanda tried her best to make sure the kids didn't feel the brunt of the fallout, she knew that they were old enough to understand that something had changed between their parents. In the quiet moments, when the youngest children were tucked in and the animals were taken care of, Amanda would find herself reflecting on the choices she had made. She had agreed to continue working with Clive because it was the practical thing to do, for the farm and for the family, but practicality didn't make the emotional weight any lighter. Every interaction with Clive, whether it was discussing the farm's needs or coordinating childcare, felt like a reminder of the past and the life they had built together before it all fell apart. Are you a fan of Amanda or Clive? Let us know in the comments.